Today, I'm going to be exploring with you a very important question for your well being, and that is how do you handle fear? Originally, this was one long video, and I decided to break this up into smaller videos because I find that most people absorb information better when provided in smaller chunks. I'll also be adding new videos as we move along, so you might want to subscribe or bookmark this channel so that you can be updated when new content is available. You are in part 1 of the series. You should be seeing a link to part 2 at the end of this video. Some of the points written in this article are written in the context of handling fear with respect to the current pandemic that we're dealing with. But I think this article will also be of good help to anyone going through fear, even well after we recover from this crisis. I don't think there's a single person alive on this planet that's free of fear, except for maybe a handful of enlightened souls. But it is possible for fear to have less of an impact on your life. It is possible for fear to not consume you. Several years ago, I was very afraid. I was laid off from a good paying job, and my unemployment benefits had run out. But that wasn't all that happened to me. My wife's chronic back issue started acting up again, and it seemed like she might have to go on disability leave. My blood sugar wouldn't go down either. My body didn't react very well to oral medicines for controlling my diabetes, so I had to go on insulin. And that was a shock in and of itself. Even if I had found a job, I don't feel like I was in any mental state to do work because I was too scared. It's like my mind was in a heightened state of anxiety, always feeling like something bad was going to happen to me or my family. Some days, I thought I was going to die. I was always the person who kept track of all the paperwork in the house, the bank books, the auto maintenance records, etc. So I anxiously prepared a file to hand off to my wife for when I would pass away. It's as if everything came tumbling down all at once. I couldn't sleep very well. I tried medicines for anxiety as well. It was one of the most painful experiences of my life. So how does this story end? Well, my confidence became so low that even though I was looking for a job as an analyst, I don't think I would have done well had I found a job doing the same type of work. I became desperate. I couldn't continue to study in the field of my choice because I was too anxious to study. I drove an Uber to keep my mind occupied, but that didn't pay enough. I finally found a job as a data entry specialist. It was the best job for me at the time because it forced me to concentrate on something very simple: getting data entered into the computer accurately. I was always a quality-focused person, and I found this to be meaningful and manageable. As it turns out, this company that hired me was facing a very serious challenge with regard to the sheer volume of data entry needed to get the job done. Had we hired 10 more data entry specialists, we still wouldn't have been able to keep up with the demand. While working there, I learned that they were trying to automate some of the data entry, and they had already done some research on a few products to try and read information from the PDF files that were being indexed by the data entry folks. This excited me. I saw an opportunity. I mentioned to them that I was actually an analyst and that I had run out of unemployment, and I was just trying to make ends meet while in between jobs. I told them that I wouldn't mind working for them as an analyst, and that I had also been a programmer in my last life many years ago, and that those skills could come in handy to drive their automation efforts. Well, they weren't convinced. so they gave me a small test. It was more of a mini project to demonstrate my skills using VBA script for Excel. That wasn't very hard for me. I had been a VB developer before, and I had also studied VBA. With Google as my guru, I was able to research any programming syntax that I didn't remember. I delivered a demo program to them ahead of schedule. With that, they offered me a job making more money. Not quite what I was making before as an analyst, but it was good enough to pay the bills. I ended up automating most of their data entry processes without having to lay off any of the existing data entry folks. There were always some manufacturers for which we could not automate the data entry processes for, so it turned out to be a win-win for everybody. I saved the company hundreds of thousands of dollars in labor costs annually, but the long-term impact is probably well into the millions. I was relieved, but it didn't end there. Having gone through this experience, I told myself I didn't want to go through anything like this ever again. How could I do that? I knew that the same fearful tendencies were in me and that my feeling of safety was circumstantial. I had a job. My wife's health was also improving. These are circumstances. My happiness was based on that. But the deeper reflective person in me was begging to get an answer to this question. Is that it? Are we just puppets whose happiness depends on circumstances? Almost every one of us will face difficult circumstances at some point in time, no matter how determined we are to take control of the situation. I remember trying to control very hard my diabetes, and the more determined I was, the more stressed out I became, and the further I was away from my goal. It seemed to me like there is such a thing as too much determination and too much desire to control everything to achieve the desired outcome. I'd always been prone to be a spiritual seeker, to get to the root of all problems, and not just rely on circumstances to be happy. This experience intensified my seeking, but I also knew that seeking may not be enough. There was a part of me that felt that the answer couldn't be rushed, and that I had to take care of my circumstances to ensure that it wouldn't happen to me again to the best of my abilities. So I did two things. When I came home from work, I studied to prepare myself for a better job so that when I got laid off from the one I had, I wouldn't be so desperate. But I also found time to pursue spirituality. I didn't want a bandage. I didn't want to rely just on circumstances. I wanted something better than that. So as far as the circumstantial fix, I handled that by studying to improve my circumstances. Being just an analyst wasn't working for me all the time, so I decided to study and go return into the world of programming. And I've been enjoying that. But what about the other aspect? What about not always relying on circumstances for my stability and happiness? How would I achieve that? And is it even possible? I will share with you what I learned about that side. I was not a novice to spirituality. The field had always interested me. When I was growing up, trying to get that basketball into the hoop, a part of me was analyzing my impulses and discomfort about my ambition to get that ball in. I remember being on roller coasters and wondering, what the heck am I doing on this ride? I never liked constantly being distracted, even though I did have a distracted mind and still do have a distracted mind. Later in this clip, I'm about to introduce some tools that I employed and still employ today to help me with fear. But before I present those tools, I want to say a few more things. Maybe some of the tools that I'm about to share with you will work for you, and maybe some of the other tools that I'm about to share with you may not be too comfortable. Employ the ones you find comfortable and explore your own ways to cope with fear. But the point is to seek solutions with prayers and an honest heart. Proactively seek solutions and don't just be plainly reactive. Being entirely reactive without trying to solve the root problem doesn't help you. Ask, how am I going to fix it? How am I going to feel better? How am I going to feel less fearful? In part 2 of this series, we start to actually explore some of the tools that I've used to feel better. And I believe these tools can also help you with your anxiety. Friends, I know it's been a long video. Take a stretch break, relax, have a cup of tea or whatever makes you happy. When you're ready, there's a link to part 2 in the video description. If you want to go straight away to part 2, you can click on the card that pops up in this video and move to part 2. Once you're there, you can pause the video and take a break if you like.